Today, our oceans are ruled by a race of giants. Megaships, up to 1/3 of a mile long.
It's just absolutely gigantic.
But when Leviathans die,
What destroyed this huge giant?
they take their secrets to the deep. Lost inside the most awe-inspiring shipwrecks on the planet. Imagine if we could empty the oceans, letting the water drain away to reveal the secrets of the seafloor. Now, we can. Using accurate data and astonishing technology to bring light once again to a lost world. Why did Britannic, sister ship to the Titanic, plunge to the bottom of the seas? How did one simple mistake send a supertanker to her death?
It was the worst oil spill in history.
And can a ghostly voice help solve a deadly megaship mystery?
I have a marine emergency.
Few of us see it, but we all depend upon it. A vast global network of megaships.
Ocean shipping is the lifeblood of the world economy today. Over 90% of world trade is carried on the water.
Over the last 40 years, carrying capacity has tripled to almost 2 billion tons. Shipbuilders are locked into a race. Bigger ships mean cheaper transport costs and lower prices for consumers.
In shipbuilding, there's always been this desire to build bigger. And the ships of today are giants of the sea.
A century ago, ocean giants don't carry cargo. They carry passengers. It's the golden age of the ocean liner. And the biggest of them all is the Titanic. When she tragically sinks in 1912, improvements are made to her sister ship, the Britannic, launched just 2 years later. She's the same length as Titanic, but 18 inches wider. However, before Britannic can carry a single paying passenger, World War I begins. And she's turned into a vast, floating hospital. 882 feet long, weighing 53,000 tons, and with enough beds for 3,300 patients. After 5 successful voyages, she sets out for the battlefields of the Eastern Mediterranean. Steaming towards the British naval base at Mudros, traveling in the Kea Channel. It's a clear day, with no enemy in sight. But shortly after 8 a.m., she sinks in just under an hour. 30 people die, but over 1,000 are rescued. The contradictory stories of the survivors begin a century of controversy.
When Britannic was lost, the key questions were, had it been torpedoed or had it been sunk by mines?
A mine is a tragic accident of war. A torpedo aimed at a clearly marked hospital ship is a war crime.
There was always a mystery about what really happened to the Britannic.
Historian Simon Mills believes hard evidence may lie in the waters off Kea Island in Greece, 400 feet down.
It was really a case of finding out what the weapon was, trying to find physical evidence on the seabed of what actually sank the Britannic.
It's a deep dive, it's a tough dive, but really excited about getting in the water.
Palm it!
Below the surface, a lost world and a wreck of startling proportions.
And as you look up, you have this beautiful deep blue that silhouettes the whole wreck. It takes your breath away, it really does.
Divers only ever see a small fraction of this lost giant.
It's absolutely massive. She's the largest liner on the seabed, and as a result, when you're diving on her, you just cannot see everything.
But now, we can drain away the Mediterranean and see Britannic in full. First, the bridge. Then the bow, lying on its side. And almost 1,000 feet away, 3 massive propellers, each as big as a house, and all still in position. The largest ship of her age, bigger than any cathedral.
It's just on a different scale. It's just absolutely gigantic.
Gigantic and perfectly preserved.
You can compare it to the Titanic, which is broken in half, twisted, mangled, and in a terrible condition, really. Whereas Britannic, you will actually find that everything is practically as it was on the day she sank.
Outstanding. Absolutely outstanding.
So what really sank her? Looking for leads, Simon turns to newspaper reports.
She was very, very big headlines for several weeks after. The Germans allegedly had torpedoed an innocent British hospital ship.
2 eyewitness accounts speak of a deliberate attack, with torpedo tracks spotted in the water moments before the explosion. In 1916, attacking a hospital ship runs against all accepted rules of war. So is this really the site of a war crime? The drained wreck site reveals evidence no diver could ever see. Face down on the ocean floor, a deformed section of the ship's hull, probably 40 feet long and 8 feet wide, where steel plates are bent inwards. Clear evidence of a devastating explosion on the outside of the ship. What weapon could create this type of blast damage? Simon is determined to hunt down physical evidence. Using a submersible, he scours the seafloor, focusing on a spot half a mile from the wreck site. the area where the explosion was reported. For hours, he sees nothing except sand and rocks. No sign of torpedo parts or fragments. But the drained landscape does reveal something. It's heavily encrusted, but identifiable as a small piece of metal 3 feet across.
It looks like a cracked eggshell.
The object is exactly the shape and size of the casing of an E-type sea mine, a standard German device from World War I. And it's lying close to the spot where the explosion was reported over 100 years ago.
When you finally see it there in front of your own eyes, you think, yeah, fabulous, we've done it. Now we finally have the physical evidence.
The mine fragments end a century of controversy. It's irrefutable evidence that eyewitnesses were confused and that Britannic was not deliberately targeted by a German submarine. In fact, some reports of a torpedo turn out to be nothing more than wartime propaganda.
No U-boats were reported to be active in this area on the day that the Britannic was sank. To be absolutely categoric, she was sunk by a mine.
With the key evidence from the drained wreck, it's now possible to reconstruct Britannic's final fatal moments. She steams through the Kia Channel. On her way to pick up thousands of injured soldiers, she strikes the mine. Probably laid 3 weeks earlier by a German U-boat.
There's a huge, massive bang. The ship shook literally for about 30 seconds.
The explosion smashes in the starboard side. Water floods into a boiler room.
With so much of the hull opened to the ocean, Britannic was doomed.
The damage is far more extensive than that which sank the Titanic. And Britannic is quickly overwhelmed. Another boiler room floods. And another, until the massive ship reaches its buoyancy limit, sealing its fate. It takes just 55 minutes from explosion to sinking. The rapid loss of Britannic and the Titanic before her alarms the world's ship designers. For the first time, international shipping standards come into force.
It did spur the international community into action.
The new laws are intended to make all ships harder to sink. And that's never been more important. In the decades after Britannic, the era of transatlantic air travel dawns. And the number of ocean liners declines. But the number of giant ships doesn't fall. There are new cargoes, one above all: oil. The world's appetite for Arabia's black gold is insatiable. Moving it from the Gulf to Europe, America, and Asia is a lucrative business and requires a new kind of ship: the supertanker. Up to 1/4 of a mile in length, these Leviathans can carry nearly 500,000 tons of crude. It's vital they're built to be safer than any previous cargo ship. are they?
It was the worst oil spill in history.
The 1,100-foot-long oil supertanker Amoco Cadiz is in the English Channel, loaded with 1.6 million barrels of crude oil. The colossal ship is traveling from the Persian Gulf to Rotterdam. When off the coast of Brittany, France, she hits heavy seas and sinks, spilling her entire load across the coast of northwestern France.
Amoco Cadiz is the world's first great supertanker shipwreck disaster. What makes it important is it's not loss of human life. It's the amount of oil on a coastline. The images of oil-covered birds flashed around the planet.
The cleanup alone cost the oil company $200 million. But how did an almost new supertanker simply break apart? 2 miles off the coast of Brittany, an expedition is underway, led by diver Christoph Garrick.
We are here to investigate the wreck.
We are trying to work out what happened.
While Christoph searches underwater, a survey team scans the seabed with side-scan sonar for the very first time.
The Amoco Cadiz is a really big ship. It's never been scanned before. So we're going to be the first people to actually see it. We can just keep going straight.
After an hour, they get a hit. And it's a big one.
Right here, that's the wreck right there. That's the stern.
It's huge. That is really huge. It's massive.
It's a big ship.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
The sonar data offers a tantalizing top-down image of a large section of the hull. Using the scan as a guide, Christoph's team focuses on an area 115 feet down.
It's an exciting experience to dive the Amoco because it's just so huge.
It is a big wreck. It's maybe the biggest wreck in the world. You feel really small compared to it. Inside, the tanker is like in a big cave. You never know where it ends.
Underwater footage offers glimpses of this giant. Now, we can do better. And slowly, a lost behemoth emerges into daylight. First, the stern. 220 feet long by 160 feet wide. Then, one of the 5 massive oil tanks. Finally, the bow, disappearing into the sand.
It's a landscape of destruction and violence. And the wreck is completely ripped apart like this.
So how was such a huge ship torn to shreds? The drained wreck provides a key piece of evidence. In one of her compartments, what appears to be a hairline crack. And there's more. All across the hull, larger sections cracked open. A closer look reveals why. A metal skin only 1.5 inches thick. A skin that once encased over 200,000 tons of oil.
To me, it's very surprising that such a big ship has such a thin hull.
The Amoco Cadiz may be nearly as big as the Empire State Building, but her hull is paper thin.
It's a crack which destroyed this huge giant.
Now, based in part on the evidence from the drained wreck, we can reconstruct exactly how the Amoco Cadiz met her end. The enormous tanker hits a force 10 gale with winds of 60 miles per hour and waves up to 40 feet high. A powerful wave slams into the rudder, smashing apart the steering gear, making the 1,100-foot-long ship impossible to control. Over the next 12 hours, the Amoco Cadiz is pushed ever closer to Brittany, notorious for its jagged, rocky coastline. Finally, at 9:04 in the evening, the inevitable happens. One tear, and another is all it takes to rupture the weak single-hulled ship. Like an eggshell hitting a wall. There are no human casualties. All 44 men aboard are rescued by helicopter. But a region of France famous for its wildlife and natural beauty is drenched in 220,000 tons of oil.
It was the worst oil spill ever. It was the worst oil spill in history.
The Amoco Cadiz changes the way the world sees giant ships.
In the aftermath of the disaster and other disasters of the same kind, there was a new law which created the obligation for double hull construction.
In theory, a double-skinned hull should be able to withstand the worst the sea can throw at it. But as the global economy continues to expand, demand for ever bigger vessels grows unabated, putting new strains on the workhorses of international trade, the bulk carrier. These giants carry almost half of the world's cargo, shunting raw materials from one side of the planet to the other. The MV Derbyshire is one of the new generation of tough superships. Almost 1,000 feet long, with a state-of-the-art double hull and 9 massive holds. She can pack in over 160,000 tons of cargo. Derbyshire is a true colossus with a range of 10,000 miles. In July 1980, she leaves Canada laden with iron ore, heading for Japan. Then, on September the 9th, she suddenly disappears without a trace. Without even a mayday call, and no sign of the 42 men and 2 women on board. Their families demand answers.
It was the ultimate shipping mystery. One minute it's there, and the next minute it's gone.
Shipwreck hunter David Mearns is looking for a lost giant, the MV Derbyshire.
It was a ship lost without trace. Something catastrophic happened to this ship, and we had to bring back the evidence.
It won't be easy. With no Mayday message, Mearns has no reliable fix on Derbyshire's final position. And the China Sea is almost 2.5 miles deep here.
Everybody talks about the needle in a haystack. Well, first off, you need to know where the haystack is.
The only hint, reports of oil slicks in the days after the ship went missing.
That's a clue to where the ship was lost.
Using sonar and gut instinct, Mearns scans the area for days, without success. Finally, on day 3...
Okay, we've got a large target.
They spot something.
We see this great big structure in front of us, and we're moving into it very, very slowly. And we're counting down to this object. 50 meters, 40 meters, 30 and 20, and then finally, at about 10 meters out of the gloom, comes this great big piece of steel, which was the side of the Derbyshire. And that was it. We had found it. This is the grave site for 44 people.
The underwater cameras pick out pieces of twisted metal. Now, as the deep ocean drains away, we can reveal the full scale of this lost giant. For the first time in nearly 40 years. A huge bow, 160 feet by 140 feet, upright on the seafloor, broken off like a discarded toy. Nearby, the cover of one of the ship's holds. Then, behind the bow, something totally unexpected. The rest of the ship, obliterated, reduced to tiny pieces, and spread out over half a square mile.
It's total, utter destruction. We're not talking just hundreds of pieces, we're talking thousands of pieces. We were just shocked.
How could a modern ship, engineered for safety and with a new double-skinned hull, end its life like this?
The real question was, not that it was broken there, but what caused the ship to sink?
3 years later, another expedition to the wreck site looks for answers. Lead engineer is Andy Bowen.
For us, the first instinct when we saw the debris on the seafloor was just awe, really. The immensity of the destruction. Really a mind-blowing thing to witness firsthand. How a ship could be so completely destroyed.
New data provides a telling clue. All around the bow, there are air vents. Closer inspection shows they're open. Their covers ripped away. Water could have entered here, flooding this section of the ship. And if the bow was flooded, the whole vessel would become increasingly vulnerable, dragging her down lower and lower into the sea. This may explain why she sank, but not why she's in fragments on the seafloor. And when Andy looks closely at pieces of the fragmented vessel, he makes a remarkable discovery. All along the edges, tiny, brittle fracture patterns. Evidence that an explosive force has blasted the hull apart. Could there be some kind of design flaw with the Derbyshire's strengthened hull? The answer lies in the strange effects of the sea on a sinking, double-hulled ship. When a ship sinks, at around 200 feet down, the pressure is 7 times greater than it is at the surface. Most ships implode as they pass this critical point, but a double-hulled ship behaves differently. As it crushes down, air trapped inside the empty spaces and voids is violently compressed. Pressure builds until it's strong enough to blow the hull apart, with a force equivalent to 16 tons of TNT. It's a phenomenon known as implosion-explosion, and takes only a matter of seconds.
It's like taking a balloon and popping it.
Only this effect can explain the Derbyshire scatter pattern on the seabed. Yet it doesn't explain why she sinks so quickly. However, using all the evidence, it's now possible to recreate the Derbyshire's exact fate in frightening detail. The 960-foot-long cargo ship, MV Derbyshire, is fully laden and headed for trouble. There's a typhoon in the area, which suddenly changes direction to put the Derbyshire in its path. Waves repeatedly crash onto the deck. Knocking the ventilator covers off the front of the ship. Seawater slowly fills a storage area inside the bow, gradually tilting the whole vessel nose down into the stormy seas.
At this point in time, the bow is full and waves are rolling up the deck of the ship.
Through the night, the ship is dragged lower and lower into the water. But in the chaos of the storm, the crew doesn't notice.
Then total disaster struck.
A massive rogue wave, possibly as high as 90 feet, smashes in the hatch cover of hold number 1, filling the hold with thousands of tons of water. With this extra weight, the Derbyshire is now sinking fast. As she goes down, the hatch covers of her other holds are exposed to the raw power of the sea.
It is a lot like an underwater bomb going off.
Hold number 1 completely floods. The others follow swiftly, in a deadly domino effect.
The vessel is being filled with water and being pulled down by the bow.
In just 2 minutes, she is gone.
The crew had no time to react, no time to send out a mayday.
There are no survivors, and no sign that any lifeboat is ever launched. This disaster helps spur even tougher action to regulate cargo ship construction. Stronger air vents on bulk carriers, along with alarms to warn if they're open.
ultimately that has really helped in terms of preventing further accidents.
Since those rules came into effect, the rate of loss of bulk carriers has been cut effectively in half.
And safety has never been more vital. The decades after the Derbyshire tragedy witnessed the most important revolution in shipping for centuries: containerization.
Container ships changed the world.
These ships are a crucial cog in globalization, a massive increase in international trade links. Today, the biggest container ships can carry over 20,000 standardized containers. These vast floating warehouses can be controlled by fewer than 30 people and use high technology to plot the safest and most fuel-efficient routes. But they're not infallible. One of the latest container ships, the Faro, is carrying almost 400 containers along with 300 cars and trailers. From Jacksonville, Florida to Puerto Rico. In suddenly menacing seas, she runs into trouble. Her captain, Michael Davidson, uses a satellite phone to make a desperate call for help.
I have a marine emergency. The clock is ticking.
But before he even gets a chance to explain what's happening, his 800-foot-long megaship vanishes off the map, along with all 33 people on board.
El Faro is the greatest marine tragedy to hit the United States in decades.
The disaster shows that even the most advanced modern ships can sometimes fail. NTSB investigator Eric Stolzenberg is on a mission to find out why.
What happened to the El Faro was a mystery. We didn't have any witnesses. We didn't have the evidence because it was lost to the seafloor.
Eric locates the wreck using its last known GPS position. It's in very deep water, 3 miles down. Sonar images suggest that the debris is spread across an area of 19 million square feet. Andy Bowen, once again the lead engineer, is eager to retrieve the ship's VDR, or Voyage Data Recorder.
Voyage Data Recorder is essentially a black box, similar to what would be in an aircraft. And so it records a variety of data streams, so conversations, telephone calls, radio calls.
Any data recorded there could be key to understanding what went wrong with the El Faro. First, the team needs to confirm the wreck's identity. They use a camera-mounted unmanned vehicle. As it descends, it begins to pick up ghostly images. Twisted metal. And then, unmistakable evidence. Yet only as the waters recede can the full scale of this gigantic cargo ship become clear. A true Leviathan of the deep, 800 feet long, standing upright as if still in harbor. surrounded by dozens of containers. A scene of utter devastation.
It was a stunning sight. Almost a blast zone of disturbed seafloor.
Working with the U.S. Navy, they immediately start searching for the VDR black box, ordinarily attached to the ship's communications mast. But the mast has been ripped away. And in a debris field as vast as this, finding it won't be easy.
The VDR is only about the size of a basketball. 7 inches by 8 inches. It's a small cylinder.
Can the team track it down and use its data to understand what happened here? A team of investigators is painstakingly scanning the huge wreck site of the El Faro. They're looking for its VDR, the Voyage Data Recorder, a tiny basketball-sized object that could explain why it sank.
Kind of like a needle in a haystack on the bottom.
After 5 days, with search time running out, they spot something glinting in the ROV's lights.
It was just enough to catch somebody's eyes, and so we drove in that direction.
It's 1/3 of a mile from where it should be. The water's murky, and the ROV moves slowly. But as soon as the object comes into view, it's clear. This is the VDR. The light is from its reflective tape, shining back at the cameras.
There was a tremendous relief for everybody because that was a major, major objective.
After a year on the seabed, does it still contain its vital data? The investigators start by replaying the voice recordings.
I have a marine emergency. We had a hull breach. A scuttle blew open during a storm.
Yeah, it was difficult to listen to VDR.
We've lost the main propulsion unit. The engineers cannot get it going.
We know how it ends, but they don't.
Oh, man. The clock is ticking.
The VDR offers first-hand evidence, but that's not all. It also contains information on the ship's final position and movements, showing that shortly before she sinks, the El Faro is flooding in hold number 3.
We have water down in 3 holes.
Going back to the drained wreck reveals something hidden in plain sight. All along one of the upper decks, large open loading areas. It's common practice to leave them open like this, because the crew expects that any water that enters here will quickly drain away. But then, the VDR reveals a critical clue.
We had a hull breach. A scuttle blew open during a storm.
A scuttle is a hatch, often located between decks. Looking at a plan of El Faro shows that if she listed severely in the hurricane, thousands of tons of water can flow in through this point, flooding her lower decks. Cars in the hold break free and strike water inlet pipes, increasing the flooding. Data from the VDR clinches it. The El Faro is listing as much as 18 degrees amid hurricane-force winds and mountainous waves. These openings are the chink in this giant's armor. Immediately, the ship is flooded. She becomes unstable, and just 20 minutes later, loses all power.
The captain does ring an abandoned ship.
But it's too late. The El Faro and all her crew are gone.
Till the very end. It was incredible bravery.
The tragedy shows that even the most modern ships aren't immune to the effects of nature at its wildest. In the meantime, the world's sea lanes get ever more crowded, and the ships plying them ever bigger.
At every stage where we've built larger and larger ships, we ask ourselves the question, how much bigger can we get? And the truth is, nobody really knows how big we can go.
Cargo ships are today reaching epic proportions. The biggest in the world is the OOCL Hong Kong, at over 1,300 feet long. Even giant passenger ships have re-emerged. Cruise liners like the Symphony of the Seas now carry over 6,000 people. The technology keeping these maritime giants safe continues to improve. But however well they are built and commanded, the ocean giants of the future will always have to face the uncontrollable power of the ocean.